What's up, YouTube people? Shaggy the Writer, out at the library. Hope you're having a wonderful evening. Can't really give you full volume like I'd like to. That's one of the things that I don't mind about doing this, is that it preserves my voice for the endeavors ahead of me. Mad love going out to the gang over there on the r/alternate history of Discord server. All kinds of love goes out to Against the World. Gee, who doing his thing. We got halfway through this book last night. We're gonna get through the other half tonight. Mad love going out to Brittany, Rakim, Marie. Don't watch Continue, Renzo Flutes, holiday affiliates. Oh man. We're on part 3. Men and War and the Death of Society. Chapter 11. Yogi Johnson walked out the workman's entrance of the pulp factory and down the street. Spring was in the air. The snow was melting and the gutters were running with snow water. Yogi Johnson walked down the street, keeping on the yet melted ice. He turned to the left and crossed the bridge over Bear River. The ice had already melted in the river, and he watched the swirling brown current. Below, beside the street, buds on the willow brush were going green. It's a real Chinook wind, Yogi thought. The foreman did right to let the men go. It wouldn't have been safe keeping them in on a day like this. Anything might happen. The owner of the factory knew a thing or two. When a Chinook blew, the thing to do was get the men out of the factory. Then if any of them were injured, it was not on him. He didn't get caught under Employers' Liability Act. They knew a thing or two, these big pulp manufacturers. They were smart, all right. Yogi was worried. There was something on his mind. It was spring, there was no doubt of that now, and he did not want a woman. He had worried about it a lot lately. There was no question about it. He did not want a woman. He couldn't explain it to himself. He had gone to the public library and asked for a book the night before. He looked at the librarian. He didn't want her. Somehow she meant nothing to him. At the restaurant where he had a meal ticket, he looked hard at the waitress who brought him his meals. He didn't want her either. He passed a group of girls on their way home from high school. He looked carefully at all of them. He didn't want a single one. Decidedly, something was wrong. Was he going to pieces? Was this the end? Well, Yogi thought, women are gone, perhaps, though I hope not. But I still have my love of horses. He was walking up the steep hill that leads from the Bear River out to the Charblow Road. The road was not really steep, but it felt steep to Yogi. His heavy legs swore with a spring. In front of him was a grain and feed store. A team of beautiful horses were hitched in front of the feed store. Yogi went up to them. He wanted to touch them, to reassure himself that there was something left. The neigh horse looked at him as he came near. Yogi put his hand in his pocket for a lump of sugar. He had no sugar. The horse put its ears back and showed its teeth. The other horse jerked its head away. Was this all that his love of horses had brought him? After all, perhaps there was something wrong with these horses. Perhaps they had ganders or spaven. Perhaps someone had been caught in the tender fog of their hoof. Perhaps they were lovers. Yogi walked up on a hill and turned to the left into the Charblow Road. He passed the last houses on the outskirts of Petoskey and came into the open country road. On his right was a field that stretched to Little Traverse Bay, the blue of the bay opening out into the big Lake Michigan. Across the bay, the pine hills behind Harbor Springs, beyond where you could not see it, Cross Village, where the native people lived. Even further beyond the Straits of Mackinac was St. Ignace, where a strange and beautiful thing had once happened to Oscar Gardner, who worked beside Yogi in the pump factory. Further beyond, the Sioux, both Canadian and American, there were wilder spirits of Petoskey sometimes went to drink beer. They were happy then. Way, way beyond, in the other direction, at the foot of the lake, in Chicago, where Scripps O'Neill had started for on that eventful night of his first marriage had become a marriage no longer. Near there, Gary, Indiana, where there were great steel mills. Near their Hammond area, where Michigan City, Indiana. Further beyond there would be Indianapolis, Indiana, where Booth Tarrington lived. He had the wrong dope, that fellow. Further down there would be Cincinnati, Ohio, and beyond that, Vicksburg, Mississippi, beyond that, Waco, Texas. There was a grand sweep to this America of ours. Yogi walked across the road and sat down a pile of logs where he could look out over the lake. After all, the war was over and he was still alive. There was a chap in this fellow that Anderson's librarian had given him in the library last night. Why hadn't he wanted the librarian anyway? Could it be because he thought she might have false teeth? Could it be something else? Would a little child ever tell her? He didn't know. What was the librarian to him anyway? This chap in the book by Anderson. He'd been a soldier too. He'd been at the front for 2 years, Anderson said. What was his name? Fred something. This Fred had thoughts dancing in his brain. Horror. One night at the time of the fighting he went out on parade. No, it was patrol in no man's land, and saw another man stumbling along in the darkness and shot him. The man pitched forward dead. It had been the only time Fred consciously killed a man. You don't kill men in war much, the book said. The hell you don't, Yogi thought. If you're 2 years in the infantry at the front, they just die. Indeed they do, Yogi thought. Anderson said the act was rather hysterical on Fred's part. He said that men with him might have made their fellows surrender. They'd all got jim jams. After it happened, they all ran away together. Where the hell did they run to? Yogi wondered. Paris? Afterward, killing this man haunted Fred. It's got to be sweet and true. That was the way the soldiers thought, Anderson said. The hell it was. This Fred was supposed to have been 2 years in an infantry regiment at the front. A couple of Indians were passing along the road, grunting to themselves and each other. Yogi called to them. They came over. Hey, Chief, you got a chew of tobacco? He asked the first Indian. Hey, Chief, you got some liquor? Asked the second. Yogi handed them a package of Peerless in his pocket flask. White Chief, you big medicine, the Indians grunted. Oh, God. Listen, Yogi Johnson said, I'm about to address you with a few remarks about the war, a subject of which I feel very deeply. The Indian sat down on legs. One of the Indians pointed at the sky. Up there, Glitchy, Manu the Mighty, he said. The other Indian winked at Yogi. Chief no believe every goddamn thing you hear. He grunted. Listen, Yogi Johnson said. He told them about the war. The war hadn't been that way to Yogi, he told all the Indians. The war hadn't been like football to him. American football. What they play at college is Carlisle Indian School. Both Indians nodded. They had been to Carlisle. Yogi had played center at football, and war had been much the same thing, intense unpleasantry. When you played football and had the ball, you were down, with your legs spread out and the ball held out in front of you on the ground. You had to listen for a signal to code it and make a proper pass. You had to think about it all the time. While your hands were on the ball, the opposing center stood in front of you. When you passed the ball, he brought his hand up and smashed into your face and grabbed up to your upper hand on your chin or somewhere in your armpit and tried to pull you forward or shove you back to make a hole he could go through and break up the play. You were supposed to charge forward so hard that you banged him out of the play with your body and put both of them on the ground. We had all the advantage. It was not what you would call fun. When you had the ball, he had the advantage. The only thing was that in the way he had the ball, you could roughhouse him. In this way, things evened up, and sometimes even a certain tolerance was achieved. Football, like the war, was unpleasant, stimulating and exciting after you had attained a certain hardness, and the chief difficulty had been of that remembering signals. Yogi was thinking about the war, not the army. He meant combat. The army was something different. You could take it and ride with it. Or you could buck the tiger and let it smash you. The army was a silly business, but the war was different. Yogi was not haunted by the man he had killed. He knew he had killed 5 men. Probably he had killed more. He didn't believe men you killed haunted you. Not if you had been 2 years at the front. Most of the men he had known had been excited as hell when they first killed. The trouble was to keep them from killing too much. It was hard to get prisoners back to the people that wanted them for identification. You sent a man back with 2 prisoners. Maybe you sent back 2 men with 4 prisoners. What happened? The men came back and said prisoners were knocked out by the barrage. They would give the prisoner a poke at the seat of their pants with a bayonet. When the prisoner jumped, they say, "You would run, you son of a bitch," and then let the gun off at the back of their head. They wanted to be sure they had killed. Also, they didn't want to go back to any damn barrage. No, sir. They learned those kind of manners from the Australians. After all, what were those Jerrys? Bunch of goddamn Huns. Huns sounded like a funny word now. All this sweetness and truth. Not if you were in there 2 years. In the end, they would have suffered. Got sorry for excesses and begun to store up good deeds against getting killed themselves. But that was the fourth phase of soldiering, gentling down. And a good soldier went to war like this. First, you were brave because you didn't think anything could hit you, because you were yourself, something special, and you knew that you could never die. Then you found out different. You were really scared then. But if you were a good soldier, you functioned the same as before. Then after you were wounded and not killed, with new men coming out and going through your old processes, you hardened and became a good hard-boiled soldier. Then came the second crack, which is much worse than the first, and then you begin doing good deeds, and being the boy Sir Philip Sidney and storing up treasures in heaven. At the same time, of course, functioning always the same as before, as if it were a football game. Nobody had any damn business to write about it, though. That didn't at least know about it from hearsay. Literature is too strong an effect on people's mind. Like this American writer, William Cather, who wrote a book about the war where all of the last part of it was taken from the action and birth of a nation, and the ex-servicemen wrote to her from all over America to tell her how much they liked it. One of the Indians was asleep. He had been chewing tobacco and his mouth was pursed up in sleep. He was leaning on the other Indian's shoulder. The man was awake and pointed to him, who was asleep, and shook his head. "Well, how did you like that speech?" Yogi asked the Indian who was awake. "Chief has sound ideas," the Indian said. "Chief educated like hell." Thank you," the Yogi said. He felt touched. Here among the simple aborigines, the only real Americans, he had found that true communion. The Indian looked at him, holding the sleeping guy carefully, that his head might not fall back upon the snow-covered logs. "Was the chief in the war?" the Indian asked. "I landed in France in May 1917, Yogi began. "Thought maybe Chief was in the war from the way he talked," the Indian said. "Him." He raised the hand of his sleeping companion up so the last rays of sunset shone in his face. "He got VC. Me, I got DSO and MC with the bar. I was major in the 4 CMRs. "I'm glad to meet you," Yogi said. He felt strangely humiliated. It was growing dark. There was a single line of sunset where the sky and water met, way out on the Lake Michigan. Yogi watched the narrow line of the sunset grow darker red, thin to a mere slit, and then fade. The sun was down behind the lake. Yogi stood up from the pile of logs. The Indian stood up too. He awakened his companion, and the man who had been sleeping stood up and looked at Yogi Johnson. "We go to Petoskey to join Salvation Army," the larger and more wakeful man said. "Chief come too," said the smaller man who had been asleep. "I'll walk with you." "Oh my gosh. "I'll walk with you," Yogi replied. Who were these guys? What did they mean to him? With the sun down, the slushy road was stiffening. It was freezing again. After all, maybe spring was not coming. Maybe it did make a difference and did not want a woman. Now that spring was perhaps not coming, there was a question about that. He could walk into town with the folks and look for a beautiful woman and try to win her. He turned down this now frozen road. 2 Indians walked by his side. They were bound all in the same direction. Oh man, I think I may have to make a phone call. If this ends up being a part 2, 3, then I guess that's on me, but we are on chapter 12. Mad love going out to Octawave against the world. Gee. All the fine folks over at the r/alternate history hub Discord, and my friend Rakeem, who through the night down the frozen road there walked into Vitowski. They had been silent walking along the frozen road. Their shoes broke the new formed crust of ice. Sometimes Yogi Johnson stepped through a thin film of ice and into a pool of water. The Indians avoided the pools of water. They came down the hill past the feed store, across the bridge over the Bear River, their boots ringing hollowly on the frozen planks of the bridge, and climbed a hill that led past Dr. Rumsey's house and the home tea room, and up the pool room. In the front of the pool room the two Indians stopped. "Chief shoot pool?" the big guy asked. "No," Yogi John said. "My right arm was crippled in the war." "Chief have hard luck," the small Indian said. "Shoot one game Kelly pool." "He got both arms and both legs shot off at yips," the big guy said in an aside to Yogi. "I'm very sensitive." "All right," Yogi said. "I'll shoot one game." They went into the hot, smoke-filled warmth of the pool room. They obtained a table and looked down at the cues from the wall. As the little Indian reached up to take the cue from Yogi, who noticed that he had two artificial arms. They were brown leather and were buckled at the elbow. On the smooth green cloth under bright electric lights, they played pool. At the end of an hour and a half, Yogi Johnson found that he owed the little guy $4.30. "You shoot a pretty nice stick," he remarked to the small man. "Not so good since the war," the small guy replied. "Chief like to drink a little?" asked the larger guy. "Where did you get it?" asked Yogi. "I have to go to Sheboygan for mine." "Chief can come with his red brothers," the big guy said. They left the pool table, placed their cues in the rack on the wall, paid at the counter, and went out into the night. Along the dark streets men were sneaking home. Frost had come and frozen everything stiff and cold. The Chinook had not been a real Chinook after all. Spring had not yet come, and the men who had commenced in their orgies were halted by the chill in the air that told them the Chinook wind had been a fake. That foreman Yogi thought, "He'll catch hell tomorrow." Perhaps it had been all engineered by the pump manufacturers to get the foreman off his job. Such things were done. Through the dark of the night men were sneaking home in little groups. The two Indians walked on either side of Yogi. They turned down the side street. The three halted before a building that looked something like a stable. It was a stable. The two Indians opened the door and Yogi followed them inside. The ladder led upstairs to the floor above. It was dark inside the stable. One of the Indians lit a match to show Yogi the ladder. The little guy climbed up first, the metal hinges of his artificial limbs squeaking as he climbed. Yogi followed him, and the other man climbed last, lighting Yogi's way with matches. The little man knocked on the roof where the ladder stopped against the wall. There was an answering knock. The little man knocked in answer. 3 sharp knocks on the roof above his head. A trap door on the roof was raised, and they climbed up through the lighted room. In one corner of the room there was a bar with brass rail and tall spittoons. Behind the bar was a mirror. Easy chairs were all around the room. There was a pool table. Magazines on sticks hung in line on the wall. There was a framed autographed portrait of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow on the wall draped in the American flag. Several Indians were sitting in easy chairs reading. A little group stood at the bar. "Nice club, eh?" The guy came up and shook hands with Yogi. "I see you almost every day at the pump factory." He's a man who worked at one of the other machines at the Yogi factory. Another Indian came up and shook hands with Yogi. He also worked at the pump factory.
rotten luck about that Chinook, he said. Yeah, Yogi said, just a false alarm.
Come and have a drink, said the first guy.
I'm with the party.
Yogi answered. Who are these guys anyway? I'll bring them along too. Always room for one more. Yogi looked around him. The two Indians who had brought him were gone. Where were they? Then he saw them. They were over there at the pool table. The tall, refined man whom Yogi was talking to followed his glance. He nodded his head in understanding. Oh, they're woods Indians, he explained apologetically. Um, most of us are townies here.
Yes, of course.
Yogi agreed.
The little chap has a very good war record.
The tall, refined man remarked. The other chap was a major too, I believe. Yogi was guided over to the bar by the tall, refined Indian. Behind the bar was a bartender. He was a black man. How would some dog's head ale go? He asked the Indian. Uh, fine, Yogi said. Two dogs' heads, Bruce, the Indian remarked to the bartender. The bartender broke into the chuckle. What are you laughing at, Bruce? The Indian asked. The bartender broke into a shrill, haunting laugh. I knew it, he said.
Mr. Red Dog,
He said,
I knew you'd order that red dog's head all the time.
he's a merry fellow, remarked the Indian to Yogi. I must introduce myself. Red Dog's my name.
Johnson's the name,
Yogi said,
Yogi Johnson.
Oh, we're quite familiar with your name, Mr. Johnson. Red Dog smiled. I would like you to meet my friends, Mr. Sitting Bull, Mr. Poison Buffalo, and Chief Running Skunk Backwards.
Sitting Bull's a name I know,
Yogi remarked, shaking hands. And I'm not one of those Sitting Bulls, Mr. Sitting Bull said. Chief Running Skunk Backwards' great-grandfather once sold the entire island of Manhattan for a few strings of wampum. Red Dog explained.
How very interesting,
Yogi said.
What a costly bit of wampum for our family.
Chief Running Skunk Backwards smiled ruefully.
Running Skunk Backwards has some of the wampum. Would you like to see it?
Red Dog asked.
Indeed I would.
It's really no different from any other wampum, Skunk Backwards explained appreciatingly, and pulled a chain of wampum out of his pocket and handed it to Yogi Johnson. Yogi looked at it curiously. What a part that string of wampum had played in this America of ours. Would you like to see if you want to get like two of these for a keepsake? Skunk Backwards asked.
I wouldn't like to take your wampum,
Yogi demurred. They got no intrinsic value, really, Skunk Backwards explained, detaching one or two wampums from the string.
Their value is really a sentimental one to Backwards' family,
Red Dog said.
It's damn decent of you, Mr. Skunk Backwards, Yogi said.
It's nothing, Skunk Backwards said. You'll do the same for me in a moment. It's damn decent of you. Behind the bar, Bruce the bartender had been leaning forward and watching the wampums pass from hand to hand. His face shone. Sharply, without explanation, he broke into high-pitched, uncontrolled laughter. Red Dog looked at him sharply.
I say, Bruce, he spoke sharply, your mirth is a little ill-timed.
Bruce stopped laughing and wiped his face on the towel. He rolled his eyes apologetically.
What can I help you, Mr. Red Dog? When I seen Mr. Skunk Backwards passing them wampums around, I just I couldn't stand it no longer. What you want to sell a big town like New York for them wampums for? Wampums. Take away your wampums.
Bruce is an eccentric, the dog explained, but he's a quirking bartender and a good-hearted chap.
You're right there, Mr. Red Dog.
The bartender leaned forward.
Always got a heart of pure gold.
He is an eccentric, though, Red Dog apologized. House committee there are always after me to get another bartender, but I like the chap oddly enough.
Oh, I'm all right, boss, Bruce said. It's just that when I see something funny, I just have a laugh. I don't know no harm, boss.
Right enough, Bruce, Red Dog agreed. You are indeed an honest chap. Yogi Johnson looked about the room. The other Indians had gone away from the bar, and Skunk Backwards was showing the wampum to a little group in dinner dress who had just came in. The pool table where two woodsmen were still playing. They had removed their coats, and the light above the pool table glinted on the metal joints of the little man's artificial arms. He had just run the table for the 11th consecutive time.
That little chap would have made a pool player if he hadn't had a bit of hard luck in the war, Red Dog remarked. Wouldn't you like to have a look about the club?
He took a check from Bruce, signed it, and Yogi followed out into the next room.
Our committee room,
Red Dog said. On the walls were framed photographs of Chief Bender Francis Parkman, D.H. Lawrence, Chief Myers, Stuart Edward White, Mary Austin, Jim Thorpe, General Custer, Glenn Warner, Mabel Dodge, and a full-length oil painting of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Beyond the committee room was a locker room with a small punch bath or swimming pool.
It's really ridiculously small for a club,
Red Dog said.
but it makes a comfortable little hole to pop into when the evenings are dull.
He smiled.
We call it the wigwam. That's a little conceit of my own.
It's a damn nice club, Yogi said enthusiastically.
Pull up if you like,
Red Dog offered. What's your tribe?
What do you mean?
Your tribe, what are you? Sac, Fox, Jibaway, Free, I'd imagine. Oh, said Yogi, my parents came from Sweden. Red Dog looked at him closely, his eyes narrowed.
You're not having me on, are you?
No, they either came from Sweden or Norway, Yogi said. I had sworn you looked a bit on the white side, Red Dog said. Damn good thing this just came out. Time. There had been no end of scandal. He put his hand to his head and pursed his lips. Here, you, he turned suddenly and gripped Yogi by the vest. Yogi felt a barrel of an automatic pushed hard against his stomach. You'll go quietly through the clubroom, get your coat and hat, and leave as though nothing happened. Say a polite goodbye to anyone who happens to speak to you, and never come back. Got that, you Swede?
Yeah, said Yogi, put up your gun. I'm not afraid of your gun.
Do as I say, Red Dog ordered. For those two pool players that brought you here, I'll soon have them kicked out of this. Yogi went into the bright room, looked at the bar where Bruce the bartender was regarding him, got his hat and coat, and said goodnight to Skunk Backwards, who asked him why he was leaving so early. And the outside trap door was swung up by Bruce. As Yogi started down the ladder, the man burst out laughing.
Oh, I knowed it, he laughed. Oh, I knowed it all the time. No Swede could have fooled old Bruce.
Yogi looked back and saw the laughing face of the man framed in the oblong square of light that came through the raised-up trap-door. Once on the side of the stable floor, Yogi looked around. He was alone. The straw of the old stable was stiff and frozen under his feet. Where had he been? He had been in an Indian club. What was it all about? Was this the end? Above him a slit of light came in the roof. There it was blocked by two black figures. There was the sound of a kick, a blow, a series of thuds, some dull, sharp, and two human forms came crashing down the ladder. From above floated the dark, haunting sound of the bartender's laughter. The two woodsmen picked themselves off the straw and limped toward the door. One of them, the little one, was crying. Yogi followed them out to the cold night. It was cold. The night was clear. The stars were out.
Club no damn good,
the big man said. Club heap no damn good. The little Indian was crying. Yogi in the starlight saw that he had lost one of his artificial arms. I'm not playing pool no more, the little guy vowed. He shook his one arm at the window of the club, which a thin slit of light came. Club heap goddamn hell no good. Never mind, Yogi said. I'll get you a job in the pump factory.
Pump factory hell, the big Indian said. We all go to join Salvation Army.
Don't cry, Yogi said to the little Indian. I'll buy you a new prosthetic. The little Indian went on crying. He sat down on the snowy road. No can play pool, me no care about nothing, he said. From above, out the window of the club, came the haunting sound of the bartender laughing. Author's note to the reader. In case it may have any historical value, I'm glad to state that I wrote the foregoing chapter in 2 hours directly on the typewriter, and then went out to lunch with John Dos Pesos, whom I consider a very forceful writer, and an exceedingly pleasant fellow besides, as well known in the provinces of log rolling. We launched on roll-knobs, Sommier, Cheveux, Le Chez Comer, Marmalade de Pomme, and washed it all down with, well, as we used to say, reader, with a bottle of Montrachet 1919, with the soul, and the bottle of Hospice de Boone 1919, a piece with the juggered hair. Mr. Dos Passos, I believe, shared the bottle of Chambertin with me over the Marmalade de Pommes, ENG applesauce. We drank 2 Vumarks and decided not to go to the Cafe de Dome and talk about art. We both went up to our respective homes, and I wrote the following chapter. I would like the reader to particularly remark the way the complicated threads of the lives of various characters in this book are gathered together, then held there in that memory scene behind the beanery. It was when I read this chapter aloud to him that Mr. Dos Passos exclaimed,
Hemingway, you have wrought a masterpiece.
P.S. from the author to the reader. It is at this point, reader, that I'm going to try and get that sweep of movement into the book that shows that the book is really a good book. I know you hope just as much as I do, reader, that I will get the sweep and movement, because think what it will mean for both of us. Mr. H.G. Wells, who has been visiting at our home. We're getting along at the library game, eh, reader? Asked us the other day if perhaps our reader, that's you, just to think of it. H.G. Wells is talking about you right in our home. Anyway, H.G. Wells asked us if perhaps our reader would not think too much of this story as autobiographical. Please, reader, just to get that idea out of your head. We have lived in Petrosky, Michigan. It is true, and it's naturally many of the characters are drawn from life as we have lived it then. But there are other people, not the author. The author only comes into the story in these little notes. It is true that before starting this story, we spent 12 years studying the various Native American dialects of the North, and there is still preserved in the museum at Cross Village our translation of the New Testament in Ojibwe. Wait, did anyone else know this? Holy Moses, wow. Like, anyone watching, I know other people know this because I'm not a Hemingway expert. That's just awesome, though. He literally was part of the group that translated the New Testament into Ojibwe. Wow. But you would have done the same thing in our place, reader, and I think if you think over it, you will agree with us on this. Now get back to the story. It is meant in the best spirit of friendship when I say that you have no idea, reader, what a hard chapter this is going to be to write. As a matter of fact, and I try to be frank about these things, we will not even try to write it until tomorrow. Oh man. I don't know how I feel about this, but this one is called Part 4, The Passing of a Great Race and the Making and Marring of Americans. But perhaps it may be objected to me that I have, against my own rules, introduced vices, and the very dark kind, into this world. To which I shall answer first, that it has been very difficult to pressure a series of human actions to keep clear of them. Secondly, that the vices to be found here are rather the accidental consequences of some human frailty or foible that causes habitual existence in the mind. Thirdly, that they are never set forth as objects of ridicule, but detestation. Fourthly, that they are never the principal figure at the time of the scene. And lastly, they never produce the intended evil, Henry Felding. Um, yeah, I guess just really wild because we're reading a book published in 1926 that was a series of editorials initially and then compiled into a book. I did not know that Hemingway was someone who actually worked on translating Native American manuscripts when he lived in Michigan. That is very awesome. And I hope y'all are just as excited by that as I am. All kinds of love going out to Against the World, Chief, as well as Octawave, all of my friends over here at the r/slash alternate history hub Discord, and of course Rakeem, Brittany, Marie, Redzo Flutes. We may have to make this wait, actually. I'm very sorry, guys. As much fun as I'm having and as easy as it'll be to finish, it's looking like I may have to go help my friend Rakeem with something. Give me like 2 seconds and we'll figure this out together. Um, oh my goodness. So, obviously, I censor this a little bit because this was written in 1926 and okay. I'm gonna go see Rakeem after everything is said and done. Oh boy. But anyway, yeah. The passing of a great race and the marring of Americans. Chapter 13. And that's folk. And that's all the things we can have folk. And that's all the things have time up and that's folk. Billy Johnson walked down the street with his arm around the little man's shoulder, the big man walking along beside them. The cold night, the shuttered houses of the town, the little man who'd lost his artificial arm, the big man who was also in the war, Yogi Johnson who was in the war too, the three of them walking, walking, walking. Where were they going? Where could they go? What was there left? Suddenly, under a streetlight that swung its drooping wire above the corner, casting its light down on the snow, the big man stopped. Walking's getting us nowhere, he grunted. Walking's no good. Let the white guy go speak. Where we go, Chief? Yogi Johnson didn't know. Obviously, walking was not the solution to their problem. Walking was all right, working its way. Coxey's army, a horde of men seeking work, pressing on toward Washington. Marching men, Yogi thought, marching on and on where they get nothing. Nowhere. Yogi knew it far too well. Nowhere, no damn where at all. Chief, speak up, the big Indian said. I don't know, Yogi said. I don't know at all. What was this they had fought from the war for? What was this that they had fought about? It looked like it. Yogi standing under the streetlight, thinking and wondering. Two Indians in their Mackinac coats, one of the Indians with an empty sleeve, all of them wondering. Chief no speak? The big man asked. No, what could Yogi say? What was there to say? Brother no speak? Asked the big man. Speak out, Yogi said. He looked out at the snow. One man's as good as another now. Chief ever go to Brown Beanery? Asked the big guy, looking at Yogi's face under the arc light. No, Yogi fell in. Was this in the end a beanery? Well, beaneries as well as any other place. But beanery? Why not? These Indians knew the town. They were ex-servicemen. They both had splendid war records. He knew that himself. But a beanery. Chief, come with your brothers. The tall man put his arm around Yogi. The little man fell into step. Forward to the beanery. Yogi spoke quietly. He was a white man, but he knew he had enough after all. The race might not always be supreme. This Moslem revolt, unrest in the east, trouble in the west. Things looked black in the south. Now this condition of things in the north, where was it taking him? Where did it all lead? Would it help him win a woman? Would spring ever come? Was it worthwhile after all, he wondered. The three of them striding along the frozen streets of Petoskey, going somewhere now en route. Husbands wrote that. It would be interesting to read French. He must try it sometime. There was a street in Paris named after Husbands, right around the corner from where Gertrude Stein lived. Now there was a woman. Oh, her experiments were in words leading her. What was at the bottom of it? All that in Paris. Ah, Paris. How far it was Paris now. Paris in the morning, Paris in the evening, Paris at night, Paris in the morning again. Paris at noon, perhaps? Why not? Yogi Johnson was striding on, his mind never still. All three of them striding on together, the arms of those that had arms linked through each other's arms. Red men and white men walking together. Sometimes it brought them together. Was it war? Was it fate? Was it accident? Or was it chance? These questions struggled with each other in Yogi Johnson's brain. His brain was tried. He had been thinking too much lately. On still they strode. Then abruptly they stopped. The little man looked up at the sign. It shone right outside of the frosted windows of the beanery. Best by test. Make 'em heap big tests, the little man grunted. Beanery got a fine T-bone steak, the tall Indian grunted. Take it from your red brother. The Indian stood uncertainly outside the door. The tall man turned to Yogi. Chief got dollars? Yes, I've got the money, Yogi answered. He was prepared to go the route. There's no time to turn back now. Feeds on me, boys. Chief's nature of a nobleman. The tall man grunted. Diamond in the rough. The little man agreed. You'll do the same for me, Yogi appreciated. After all, perhaps it was true. It was a chance he was taking. He had taken a chance in Paris once. Steve Brody had taken a chance, or so they said. Chances were taken all over the world every day. In China, Chinamen were taking chances. In Africa, Africans. In Egypt, Egyptians. In Poland, Poles. In Russia, Russians. In Ireland, Irish. In Armenia, Armenians don't take chances. The tall man grunted quietly. He had voiced Yogi's unspoken doubt. They were canny folk, these red men. Oh, God. Not even in a rug game. Brother, think not, the Indian said. His tones carried conviction to Yogi. Who were these men? There was something back of all this. They went into the beanery. Author's note to the reader. It was at this point in the story, reader, that if Mr. F. Scott Fitzgerald came into our house one afternoon and remained for quite a while, suddenly sat down at the fireplace, and would not, or was it could not, reader, get up and let the fire burn something else, so as to keep the room warm. I know, reader, that these things sometimes do not show in a story, but just the same they are happening, and think what they mean to chaps like you and me in this literary game. If you should think this part of the story not as good, it might have been, remember, reader, that day in and day out all over the world things like this are happening. Need I add, reader, that I have the utmost respect for Mr. Fitzgerald, and let anybody else attack him, I will be the first to spring to his defense. That includes you too, reader, though I hate to speak bluntly like this, and take the risk of breaking up a friendship of sort that ours has gotten to be. P.S. to the reader. As I read the chapter over, reader, it doesn't seem so bad. You may like it, I hope you will. And if you do like it, reader, the rest of the book will be liked as well. Will you tell your friends about it? Try and get them to buy the book, just as you have done? I only got 20 cents for each book that is sold. While 20 cents is not much nowadays, still it'll amount up to a lot of 200,000 or 300,000 copies are sold. They will be too. Everyone likes this book as much as you and I do, reader. And listen, reader, I meant it when I said I wouldn't be glad to read anything you wrote. That wasn't just talk. Bring it along and we'll go over together if you like. I'll rewrite bits for you. I don't mean that in a critical way either. If there is anything you'd like to do, not like in this book, just write to Mr. Scribner's sons at the home office. They'll change it for you. Or rather, I will change it myself. You know what I think if you read it? You're not angry or upset about what I said about F. Scott Fitzgerald either, are you? I hope not. I'm going to write down the next chapter. Mr. Fitzgerald is gone, and Mr. Dos Passos has gone to England, and I think I can promise you that it will be a bully chapter. At least it'll be good as I can write it. We both know how good that can be if we read the blurbs. Hey, reader. Oh man, this is saying I've got 2 minutes on this session, and I've got 2 chapters left. And I'm going to have to end out this session and come back in like 3 to 5 minutes. But we're going to finish this book tonight, I think. Let me just check my phone real quick. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to let the session end and then come back. And then we've got 10 pages, so it won't even take that long. We can totally get this finished. I wish I knew how to extend this session, though. They don't even have the option. Like I said, readers, really appreciate y'all showing up tonight. I will be back in like 3 to 5 minutes with the final 10 pages. It'll be brief, but it'll totally be worth it. Shouts out again to the World G. Shouts out to r/alternate history hub. Shouts out Octo Wave. Shouts out Renzo Flutes. Shouts out lots and lots of people. Raheem and Brittany and Marie. There's other people that be watching this too. When they tell me about it, I feel bad when I can't think of shouting out people. Because I love y'all so very, very much. Peace.